Prince Louis has pulled focus at royal appearances before, but what happened at the Commonwealth Games is different. While the cameras were trained on William and Kate in their official capacity, it was their youngest who quietly dismantled every carefully managed expectation the palace had built around this outing. Sources suggest no one planned for this, no briefing prepared for it. And yet that single unscripted moment from an 8-year-old has shifted something real in how the public sees this family. What actually happened and why it matters is bigger than any headline captured. August 1, 2026, Glasgow, and the Prince and Princess of Wales didn't arrive alone. That detail matters more than it sounds. William and Kate have attended dozens of official engagements over the years, hundreds if you count the full scope of their royal duties. But bringing all three children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, to a single public outing is genuinely rare. Sources close to the Wales household describe moments like this as carefully rationed. The children's exposure is managed, deliberate, and never accidental. So when all 5 members of the family walked into the Hydro Arena together on that Friday afternoon, people who understand how the palace operates took notice immediately. This wasn't a casual family day out. It was a calculated but warm signal that William and Kate were willing to let the public see something real. The 2026 Commonwealth Games had already delivered its share of spectacle. King Charles and Queen Camilla had opened the Games days earlier in characteristically theatrical fashion. Over 3,000 athletes from 74 nations were competing across Glasgow. The city was electric, but sources suggest the moment the Wales family arrived, something quietly shifted in the atmosphere inside that arena. Because while the Games had celebrity, history, and competition, it suddenly also had a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old, and an 8-year-old sitting in the public stands like any other family watching sport. And it was the 8-year-old that nobody was quite ready for. The question is, what did Louis actually do once those cameras found him? Now, the arena itself had already been doing what big sports venues do, noise building in waves, crowd leaning forward, phones raised, when the Jamaica versus Australia netball semi-final actually got underway at OVO Hydro. Sources suggest the match was precisely the kind of contest that makes casual spectators forget they're supposed to look composed. Fast, physical, genuinely contested. Jamaica and Australia had been trading momentum for the better part of the first half, and the crowd inside that arena was responding accordingly. And somewhere in those packed stands, an 8-year-old was responding most of all. What Louis did wasn't choreographed, it wasn't briefed. Nobody in the royal communications operation had written, "Prince Louis reacts expressively to netball," into the run-of-show document. Sources say what happened was simply this. He watched, completely absorbed, and his face did everything his parents were quietly trained not to let theirs do. Wide-eyed at a fast intercept, visibly deflated when a shot missed, head turning to whoever was beside him, something to say, couldn't help it. The expressions came in rapid succession, genuine and unguarded in a way that, in a public royal appearance, genuinely stands out. Because here's what people sometimes forget about these events. William and Kate are good at this. They are professionally warm, appropriately engaged, correctly enthusiastic, decades of practice. But there is a discipline underneath it, a careful calibration. Louis has none of that yet, and that, sources suggest, is precisely why the cameras found him and then couldn't quite look away. It started as a crowd thing first, people nearby noticing, nudging, smiling. Then the cameras picked it up. Then it spread. By the time the semi-final reached its sharpest moments, Louis wasn't a background detail in a royal outing anymore. He was, quietly and completely, without trying, the most watched person in the building. But the netball match was only the beginning of what this day was going to produce. Because after the final whistle, the Commonwealth Games mascot started working its way down the royal lineup. And what happened next with George, Charlotte, and Louis was the kind of moment that makes even veteran royal watchers put down their notebooks. The mascot's name was Feeney, and sources suggest nobody on the official schedule thought very hard about what would happen when Feeney reached the children. The lineup went in order. George first, then Charlotte, then Louis. Each scored a high 5. Clean, enthusiastic, completely genuine. Then Feeney moved to William and Kate, and the register shifted slightly. Fist bumps for the parents, the polite, measured version of the same greeting. Nothing about that is unusual. Mascots read their audiences. Children get the big energy. Adults get the diplomatic version. That's how it works. But the cameras caught something no briefing document prepared for. The contrast between the children's pure, unguarded delight and their parents' necessarily composed reaction told the whole story of the day in about 12 seconds. George lit up. Charlotte's response was exactly what you'd expect from a girl who has learned to be measured in public but couldn't quite contain it. And Louis gave Feeney the kind of full commitment high five that suggested he had been waiting his entire 8 years for this specific opportunity. Sources suggest it was one of those moments that look small in isolation, genuinely small. A mascot, a lineup, 3 high fives, but collectively, it was the second piece of something building across the entire visit, a portrait of a family that, when unscripted, operates on a completely different frequency than the world usually gets to see. And the day was only going to get more unscripted from here, because the next stop was the velodrome, and who was sitting directly in front of them would change the atmosphere entirely. The velodrome hit differently. After the noise and color of the netball and the mascot lineup, sources suggest the family's move across the city to the Sir Chris Hoy velodrome carried a quieter kind of electricity. Different venue, different atmosphere, the banking of the track, the speed, the silence between moments, and sitting directly in front of William and Kate, the man the velodrome is actually named after. Sir Chris Hoy, 6 Olympic gold medals, the greatest British cyclist who has ever lived, and he was right there, close enough to talk to. Sources say the sight of a 6-time Olympic champion sitting a row ahead of your children is the kind of thing that even composed, rehearsed royal visits cannot fully prepare for, because you cannot script what a child does when they are sitting behind a living legend in the building that carries his name. Now, also in that section of the velodrome was Dame Laura Kenny, Britain's most successful female Olympian, 5 gold medals and a silver across her career, and the family chatted with her directly. Not a formal greeting, not a scheduled exchange, an actual conversation, the kind that sources suggest was visibly relaxed, genuine, and completely unrehearsed. And then there was Charlotte. Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, and Sophie were also watching the track cycling alongside the Wales family. And Charlotte, 11 years old and usually the most carefully composed of the 3 children in public, was caught in what sources describe as a genuinely playful exchange with Prince Edward. Nothing theatrical, just a niece and her uncle at a velodrome. In a moment, the cameras caught but no briefing document created. That is the detail that matters, because what the velodrome session quietly confirmed is that when you remove the formal scaffolding and place this family inside a real sporting environment surrounded by real champions, something different emerges, something that feels less like a royal appearance and more like a family actually being somewhere together. But the velodrome was, in one specific way, only half the story of what this visit was about to become, because once they reached the Team Wales meet and greet, Kate said something about Louis that nobody in that room was expecting. Every official measure, a structured engagement, handshakes, brief conversations, a few photographs, the kind of moment that gets planned to the minute and rarely produces anything that wasn't already expected. And then Kate mentioned the handstands. Sources say the Princess of Wales, chatting with Welsh athletes during the session, casually revealed that Louis had been practicing handstands at home. Not as a formal announcement, not as a curated talking point, just the kind of thing a mother mentions when the conversation turns to gymnastics and a small boy nearby is very much invested in his own athletic reputation. Now, what happened next is the moment that genuinely stopped the room. Charlotte, standing close enough to hear every word, delivered her verdict without hesitation. 4 words, utterly precise, completely devastating in the way only an older sibling can manage. It isn't very good. That was it. No elaboration, no softening, just the honest, unsentimental assessment of a girl who has watched her younger brother attempt handstands and has formed a clear opinion. The room laughed, not politely, actually laughed, and what sources suggest that moment quietly revealed is something no official appearance schedule could have manufactured. Because the handstand story works for exactly one reason, it is entirely believable. Louis practicing something with enormous personal confidence while his sibling silently catalogs the gap between ambition and execution. That dynamic does not require context. Anyone who has ever had a brother or sister recognized it immediately. But the real consequence of that 30-second exchange is what it did to the day's entire narrative arc. Up to this point, Louis had been the most expressive presence in every room they entered. Now he was also, officially, a character in a story with a punchline. The 8-year-old who believes in the handstand, the 11-year-old who does not. That, sources say, is the moment Louis was cemented as the entertainment centerpiece of the visit. Not because anyone planned it, because Charlotte told the truth. And what happened next would only deepen that impression, because the family was about to hear a story of Welsh sporting history that none of the children had ever encountered before. And then the room shifted, because standing in front of the Wales family, waiting to be introduced, were 2 people who looked completely identical. Abigail and Emily Roper, gymnasts, bronze medalists, and the answer to a question most people in that room had not known to ask. Sources say the moment William and Kate realized they were looking at twins, both parents visibly paused. That small beat lasted barely a second, but it set the tone for everything that followed. Here is what makes the Roper twins more than just a feel-good detail. Abigail and Emily had just made Commonwealth Games history, winning their bronze medals within hours of each other at Glasgow 2026. Not in the same event. Separate competitions, separate timelines, separate performances, 2 medals, 1 family, 1 extraordinary afternoon. Sources suggest no twin pairing had ever done that before at these games. That is not a footnote. That is the headline. But the layer beneath the headline is the one that genuinely stopped the children. Because what William and Kate quietly explained to George, Charlotte, and Louis was this: Wales had not won a gymnastics medal at the Commonwealth Games in 32 years. 32 years of effort, near misses, and close calls, and then one afternoon in Glasgow, 2 sisters delivered twice in the same day. For George at 13, that timeline stretches back before he was born. For Louis at 8, it is practically ancient history. Sources suggest Louis, still processing the scale of it, looked between the 2 twins more than once, the way children do when they are genuinely trying to locate the difference and cannot find one. Charlotte, characteristically, asked the more direct question: which one went first? It was Abigail. Emily followed hours later. 2 performances, 2 podiums, 1 piece of Welsh sporting history 32 years in the making that arrived in a single day. What struck people watching the interaction, sources say, was not just the children's reaction. It was William's, quietly, genuinely delighted. The kind of delight that reads as completely unrehearsed. The family was not finished with surprises, though, because the next moment would involve a tandem bike, a very firm no from George, and William walking directly into the most honest thing a 13-year-old had said all day. The tandem bike question came from somewhere inside the velodrome complex, the kind of casual, friendly exchange that happens when athletes and officials feel comfortable enough to just talk. Someone asked the children whether they'd like to see William and Kate take a tandem bike out together. George answered first, immediately. No hesitation, no diplomatic softening, just a flat, instinctive no. Sources say everyone heard it, the kind of answer that lands in a room before anyone has time to prepare for it. William's response was immediate, completely unrehearsed. He looked at George and said, with the particular deadpan of a parent who has accepted his position in the family hierarchy, that they already embarrass him enough as it is. On the surface, that's just a charming family moment. A 13-year-old being brutally honest, a father leaning into it rather than away from it. But what struck people watching, sources suggest, was what it revealed about how this family operates when the script runs out. Because every royal appearance has a structure. Arrivals, engagements, departures. What it rarely has is a 13-year-old vetoing a tandem bike with the confidence of someone who has seen enough. That unscripted corner of the day, sources say, was quietly doing more for public perception of the Wales family than anything on the official itinerary. But the day still had one more unscripted moment waiting. And this one belonged entirely to Lewis, who was about to be handed a job and took it very seriously indeed. And that's where Louis steps in. Sources suggest what happened next was not planned as a centerpiece moment. It was a small, practical task, the kind of thing organizers hand to visiting guests to give them something to do. But Lewis, 8 years old, treated it with the kind of focused seriousness that made everyone in the room stop and watch. He was given the job of updating the Team Wales medal board, specifically sliding the number 7 into place over the existing tally of 5. Not a speech. Not a photo opportunity engineered by a communications team, just a child, a board, and a number. Now, sources say, what no one quite prepared for was the execution. Because Louis did not rush it. He did not fumble it or do it with the distracted half-attention of a child who would rather be somewhere else. He approached the board, found the number, and slid it into position with the kind of deliberate, concentrated precision that an 8-year-old reserves for things he has genuinely decided matter. Then he stepped back, looked at it, and appeared. Sources suggest, quietly satisfied with the result. The room responded with a loud round of applause. And that was the moment. Not the netball reactions, not the mascot high fives, not Charlotte's demolition of his handstand reputation. This. A child doing a small job properly, and the crowd rewarding him for it, completely, and without any of the usual royal performance coating around it. Sources close to the day say it was genuinely unrehearsed. The task itself was real. Wales had won 2 more medals since the board was last updated, and someone needed to change it. Lewis was simply the person handed that responsibility at that particular moment, but what it produced, sources suggest, was something the official itinerary never could have engineered. A defining image of a child participating in something real, not performing alongside something ceremonial. The board now read 7. Lewis had put it there. The crowd had seen it happen. Royal watchers who have spent years observing carefully managed appearances noted afterwards that the moment cut through precisely because it was so unmanaged. Nothing about it was styled. Nothing about it was symbolic in the way palace communications teams design symbolism. It was just a boy, a number, and a job done. And in a day already full of moments that sources say were quietly reshaping how the public reads this family, that small act landed differently than all the structured ones around it. What no one had yet noticed, though, was that Louis was not finished. Because there was still something left at the bottom of the goodie bag that the family had been given, and what Louis pulled out of it would turn out to be the single image that every outlet ran the next morning. A bright red bucket hat. That is what Louis pulled out of the goodie bag. Not a flag, not a medal, not anything the communications team had planned for. A Baiko Kumru bucket hat, red as anything, and he put it straight on his head. Sources say that single image, an 8-year-old in an oversized red hat, grinning without a trace of self-consciousness, was the photograph that ran everywhere the following morning. Consider what that means. A day that included Sir Chris Hoy within arm's reach, Dame Laura Kenny, Commonwealth Games history made by Welsh twins, a mascot, a velodrome, an official medal board update, all of it carefully choreographed, all of it genuinely significant. And the image editors reached for was Louis in a hat. Because what Louis did, quietly and without design, was give every outlet something no official appearance can manufacture. Spontaneity. The genuine, unguarded, unrepeatable kind that sources suggest audiences have been starving for from royal coverage for years. George and Charlotte have learned, as children in this position inevitably do, to carry themselves with composure. It reads well. It is appropriate. But Louis, still 8, has not yet arrived at that restraint, and in that gap between what is expected of this family and what Louis actually does is where every memorable moment from this day lived. The hat was not the finale because it was the biggest moment. It was the finale because it was the truest one. And the question now is simply this: how much longer before the palace starts planning around him rather than beside him? Louis stole the show. The Wales family won the room. The monarchy's image won the day. But a child's unscripted joy can't be managed forever. This wasn't just a family outing. It was a soft power masterclass. The question is, who's really being positioned here? The heir apparent,